Hello ratbags, it's Jade. Welcome to a look at Last Oasis and why I'm so excited about them about to turn their servers back on after nearly a week of inactivity after launch. Last Oasis was doing incredibly well, 25,000 players playing it, possibly over 100,000 people actually bought the game. That all came to a halt though when they realised there was big problems with their servers and they shut them down for a week. To their credit, they offered full refunds despite how much time you played in the game, and so it really is a sign of a good developer trusting in their products it will come good. That hasn't stopped the hype generating, it hasn't stopped me actually being super excited about playing. Last Oasis has triggered something in me, PvP quench, a thirst for blood, that none of the other survival games I've covered over the years has really given me. Not in the same way anyway. So they're just announced in their Discord that the servers will be tested massively tonight. I took part in a beta test last night for it to see if what was going on. And they want everyone to join back in tonight at 8 PM Central Eastern Time. And hopefully if it all goes well, the servers will be back up and running as normal tomorrow. So I'm going to be talking about why Last Oasis solves so many of the big PvP problems I see out there. Why I think it's going to be better in the long run over so many of your favourite PvP games. And even though it's just the start and they've had a bit of a rough patch, Last Oasis really could come out of this as one of the biggest survival PvP winners in a long time. So let's clarify a few things quickly. I've covered Ark Survival Evolved for 5 years. I've never delved too much into PvP. I've had my own little servers, I've done tournaments and stuff, but the meta, the actual being part of it on a daily basis, that grind to get your turret towers, no, not for me fam. I've got a life, I don't want to be spending all my time raising baby dinosaurs, only to see them get wiped out literally a few days later. And that's what Ark is. It's incredibly grindy, and it's way too easy to get wiped of all your progress that you've built up over weeks, sometimes even months. It's not like Rust where it's quick arcade. You can build yourself up a decent little base in just a couple days on Rust. And if you get raided, you know you're going to be back out there trying to get yourself a hazmat, trying to get yourself some decent weapons to have at least some skirmishes. But in Ark, when you get wiped, that is it. It's game over. It's going to take you a significant amount of time to get built back up. Taming creatures for hours on end. Weeks raising baby dinosaurs to be your bullet sponges. It's the most unrewarding PvP experience there is. For me, anyway. I do appreciate some people love it and they feel that big accomplishment when they've got their big turret base or they've broken into someone's base. But the majority of PvP in Ark is literally taking players out while they're offline. And that to me isn't PvP. Ark is literally a tower defense game. I borrowed that from Hod Gaming, big shout out to him. And it's so true. You put your towers down. You put your sponge bullet soaking dinosaurs in front of your bases and you just hope it's enough to see you through the night while you sleep. It's all about that bullet grind to get as many bullets in your turrets to keep your bases safe. Bearing in mind, Ark has got over 150 different unique creatures in the game, yet the biggest meta is still relying on having turret towers. Where is the conflicts that we see in the Ark trailers? Where are dinosaurs versus dinosaurs in the open battlefield? Where's the strategy between having units of certain dinosaurs that will help you out in the battlefield? It's not really there. Most people rely on the same sort of 7 or 8 dinosaurs in Ark Survival Evolved because it is the only meta to succeed. It's my biggest problem with Ark is the offline raiding, and that's the first problem that Last Oasis solves. Simple facts, you can get rolled over in Last Oasis pretty easily, and me and my crew got done over plenty of times. But if you're smart, if you pay attention, if you're actually playing the game how it's meant to be, you should never really get offline raided. The whole point of Last Oasis, something so positive about it, is you can take your base, pack it up onto your walker, and you can fuck off to the edge of the map and log out safely. No worrying about being raided offline because some no-lifer 14-year-old spotty kid is going to be sitting there playing till 5 o'clock in the morning. Don't take that personal, you spotty 14-year-old kid. There's plenty of adults double your age that are probably doing the same shit. A PvP game should not be decided about how much time you can devote to it. Yes, you shouldn't maybe be able to have the same fucking power level playing the game only for an hour as someone who's put maybe 1,000 hours into it. Likewise, you shouldn't be relying on your actual meta being wiping people while they sleep. I don't think I can count on 2 hands how many raids I've actually seen in Ark where all the players are online. It's always usually one fucking idiot being left on the base because he's the one guy from Mexico that's still on the server, crying his eyes out as he gets raided by 10 people from EU. Ark is not a PvP game. It is simply about time, management and placing them turrets. And Last Oasis is such a breath of fresh air. You've got a base you've built, amazing. Pack it all up, put it in your walker and go off about your business. Yes, you can get raided on the way. The danger is still there. You can still lose it all within moments if you come across another well-established crew. And they don't even have to be that big. They don't have to have a bigger walker than you. They just need the right tools and the right equipment, and you can also be gone. But it's definitely a lot more balanced in Last Oasis. It actually means that when you come across players, the chances are you're all going to be thinking about having a fight, or maybe trying to scurry back off to somewhere safe so you can get away. And that's very different from what the combat loops are in Ark Survival Evolved and other games. I can't stress enough how much it's a game changer not having to worry about your shit being wiped just because you've got to go to work or you're sleeping. There are of course some problems and issues, and we're going to address that. I'm not going to be sitting here coming all over Last Oasis with praise, but for sure the biggest problem it solves, does it so expertly and easily and good, is how to stop the offline cancer that has infected so many of these games. Of course, there may be problems when things start to dry up a bit. Maybe the player population drops a little bit and people find themselves on quite empty servers. But that's the beauty of Last Oasis. They can contract and expand their servers when they want. Atlas, a game with very much similarities to Last Oasis, is pretty much a ghost world at the moment. Meant to hold up to 40,000 players, it's struggling to even reach 4,000, and that's with Steam and Xbox users. And this is where Last Oasis shines, being able to control these servers and be able to guide the population to make it busy if it does get a little bit quiet, or to expand it if it does get too busy. And this all helps extra combat as well. Ark's credit, you can do that too. You can server transfer. But instead of it being a mechanic to contract and guide the player base, it ends up just being these mega tribes that just go rolling server after server after server. But Last Oasis seems to nail that just a little bit better. So yeah, that's how Last Oasis kicks Ark's butt when it comes to offline raiding and any other survival game you want to mention. Shout out to Conan Exiles that have tried various different things like having timed PvP on their conflict servers, which are the most popular. They do have full out raid servers and they have PvE servers obviously as well, but the conflict ones seem to be the most popular, where normally the raid times are like 4 PM your time to like 11 PM. Now of course the big problem with that is if you don't work regular boring 9 to 5 hours, you generally might miss out on a lot of PvP and you probably won't be able to play on them servers. During that window you can offline base raid people and a hell of a lot more. But at least they try to do something different. They recognise that maybe Ark's full on raid when you want wasn't the answer. But it still fails because it doesn't take into account other people's lives and pretty much makes you play the game at their timetable. When you add on the limited numbers, only 40 players on the server and no transfers, and Conan gets pretty stale pretty quickly. Now Rust isn't going to get as much criticism because Rust to me is a very arcadey, action-packed game. You can build yourself up as I mentioned earlier, and it's not the end of the world if you get raided or wiped. You can build up pretty quickly within a few days. So yeah, 1-0 to Last Oasis versus offline raiding. 2. The grind. Now this may not be the other game's issues, more or less a bit of an attack on survival games in general. But for sure, the grind is also one of the biggest barriers that stops a lot of people getting into these games. Not only do you have to worry about being offline raided, you've literally got to spend hours going and get stone. Now Ark has dedicated creatures to help you with this. So that's one thing they do, they manage with their meta. You're meant to be utilising the full length of all the dinosaurs to help you get the resources you need. Conan Exiles has not really got the same sort of thing. It's relied much more heavily on their weapons and tools in the past, and definitely having your thralls do the work in terms of crafting so much stuff so you've got better quality items. But either way, both games contribute massively to that grind. And it is a sense of accomplishment when you've got your big killer base up and running. Now Last Oasis does have the grind, but again it doesn't feel nowhere near as horrid. Within minutes you're on one of your walkers. You can jump straight into it, you're having fun. You can pick up the fragments that give you the knowledge to learn weapons and blueprints and items much quicker. And right now in the early stages of early access, it seems like the balance is just about right. It will take you still significant time if you want to get the best walkers and the best ballistas and items. It doesn't feel like you have to be with another clan. Bigger clans in any survival game are always going to be doing better than a small solo crew. Facts. Anyone that moans about this being this type of game, what do you play? This is what it's for. They're multiplayer games. They're designed for people to join together. Doesn't mean you can't have fun on your own. Doesn't mean you can't try and start out on a small little clan. But the idea is that you grow. You could play this solo, albeit it will be harder still. And strictly related to PvP, like I mentioned earlier with the bullet situation in Ark, you got to grind hundreds of hours to get your bullet supply up. In Conan Exiles, it's about having your base pieces with the highest security tier, and again that's going to take you a significant amount of time. But right now, Last Oasis in its very early stages seems much simplified, seems much quicker and easier to get some of this stuff so that you're having fun actually having combat. So for me right now, things may change, Last Oasis is nailing it just about right. Within the first day I did see other players running around on their spider walkers and much more. These survival games are always going to rely on people that have the most time, that have the most knowledge and experience, and that's fine. But Last Oasis balances out that aspect where if you don't have as much time, you can still have fun. There are obviously always going to be issues with players being cubs like baby seals at the start of the game. But that isn't Last Oasis' fault, that's just the survival genre in general. It doesn't matter if you're playing Ark on the beach bobs or Conan in the very first desert oases, you're going to get picked on by the bigger bully clans unless you're smart in how you play the game just a little bit more covertly. And even then, having servers that experienced players can't go back to, the cradle starting servers, is a great idea, and it's another way that Last Oasis helps solve the beginner newbie problem getting owned. So maybe not a clear winner with that one, but for sure with grind it wins, and with clan sizes and the way they dominate, well that's just a symptom of all survival games, not just Last Oasis. Now let's talk about the combat of Last Oasis. The ability to swing your weapon in different arcs in different ways really does make Last Oasis stand out a little bit more skill based. It isn't just the mindless hacking away like Ark Survival Evolved or the horrendous netcodes that holds back so much of Conan Exiles' combat. Last Oasis feels responsive, it feels good, feels like it could be any way left or right when you're having a battle with someone, depending on how skilled they are. We were regularly getting shanked by one player because we're all kind of noobish to this. It took 4 of us to take out this one dude, and that's the way it should be. A skilled player should be able to hold off a good few players, until eventually might will always overcome. Now in Ark, it's pretty much a joke that you actually have any sort of hand-to-hand combat or regular combat with a player. You're meant to be using your dinosaurs, and even then that rarely happens. It's all just about the turrets and soaking up them bullets. Not often do you see someone leading a line of T-Rexes, Allos and a bunch of other dinosaurs in a direct charge at someone's base, because they'll be shredded within minutes. You don't have the open warfare battle where you come across a player and he's got his units of dinosaurs and you've got yours. Instead, what you rely on is coming across one lone dude harvesting, and you're lucky enough to try and bowler him and then take him out with a spear or a fucking pike. With the ability for players to increase their speed so they can zoom around like Sonic the fucking Hedgehog, good luck trying to hit anyone with a sniper bullet or an AK. Bullet ballistics and gunplay in Ark Survival Evolved is probably one of the worst out of all of these games I've mentioned, and the combat itself is just not there. Compare that to Last Oasis, where if you've got the right weapon, yes it can feel a bit OP, everyone's running around with them big bone swords, and for good reason because they are one of the most damaging. But it doesn't mean you haven't got a chance. As long as you've got the experience, as long as you've got used to the combat, you can fend off multiple players. It does need a bit of work and refinement. There's definitely some issues with some of the boxes already that I feel. But overall, the combat, the fluidity of it, the way it plans out, you do need that level of skill, and it's much more rewarding when you take another player out. Conan Exiles has tried its best to add a bit more than just mindlessly bashing one button. It's got its combos, it's got its light and heavy attacks, and it pretty much all works well. It's just the netcode underneath it that lets Conan down. Jankiness of the moves, stun locking is a big feature of Conan Exiles, and even recent changes where they kind of nerfed a lot of the movement from players, it still hasn't really fixed the issue, and it's something that devs have long recognised, that they want their game to be Dark Souls-esque with the combat, but it's just not there enough. They've got lovely pretty animations for a lot of their weapons and swirling blades and everything else, but when it boils down to it, the combat just doesn't feel as close. Most players will just be running around you still because they've still pumped their player stamina up. It doesn't feel like you're actually in a proper battle with someone. It's more or less just try and hit them while they run around. Last Oasis doesn't feel like that. I felt like I was in close combat every time I come up against another player. And so for me, that's why it beats out Conan's combat at the moment. Give it another year with early access, and who knows what kind of other animations or what ways they can refine the skill combat in Last Oasis. I'm excited about where they could take it even further. Now, of course, it doesn't have much reliance on ranged combat. There is no crossbows yet, but I do believe they're going to be adding stuff like that in the future. But it is a melee focused game, and that is really what they want this game to be. And I've got no problems with that. As I said, a lot of these games have really crap netcode. So whenever you fire projectiles like arrows and bullets, it's really pot luck whether or not you'll actually have the skill to actually hit anyone. You've kind of got to learn exactly how shit the netcode is for these games if you want to succeed. Now there are improvements they need to make. The walker combat especially, having just turrets on your walkers is great, but I would like to see being able to do a lot more damage with some of the larger walkers against some of the smaller ones. Maybe it's part of the early access period, but your little Firefly was pretty much indestructible. We were chucking them off cliffs, smashing them into all sorts, getting rolled over by other clans, and none of it was really damaging it. You had to make a concerted effort to really damage your walker, but once we start seeing more fleets of different style walkers, the clans are building up and groups are getting better equipped, it's going to be even more exciting coming across another group that has multiple different style walkers or some of the biggest, largest ones going. And again, it's something that makes Last Oasis so fresh and different. Don't have to take weeks planning and prepping to get a dinosaur. The mounts in Conan Exiles are pretty much useless other than carrying shit. In Last Oasis, your walker is your life. It's your baby, it's your dinosaur, it's your mount, it's your thrall. It is your number one priority. Keeping it safe, keeping it alive, it will make sure that you succeed. Jumping on top of the sails, clambering on like you're some pirate is absolutely amazing, and it does such a better job than another game I've not really mentioned, Atlas. Atlas has also tried to solve the PvP problem in the past. It pretty much started out just like Ark Survival Evolved, with the idea though that you would set up claims all around the enemy's territory if you wanted to own that piece of land. It's evolved and changed so much since then, I really couldn't tell you exactly how it's working now, other than I know there's some sort of token you have to buy to declare war on another tribe. The ship battles in Atlas can be fun, but all too often it's still just a little bit lacking. The mobility to move around with your ships, the lack of choice in the styles of ships that you've got really hampers that type of gameplay, and it is meant to be their next big focus, what they look at in making the ships more exciting and more things to do. Last Oasis has come out of the gate already with 13 different walkers. All of these walkers have their own unique strengths and purposes, and they look absolutely fantastic. I do think it's important to compare it to Atlas a little bit, because you can kind of see where Donkey Crew again have taken lessons. And pretty much that's what I'm going to finish off with. Donkey Crew have looked at all these other survival games, and they've said it themselves in the past. What are the biggest problems with some of them? And it really does feel like they're trying to solve them. They're not going to get everything right. Counter-attacks and chambering with the combat still needs to be worked on massively. But overall, starting out in this way, it's just got so much better mechanics than some of the other survival games I've mentioned. It doesn't require all your time. It does require you to be a bit skilled, and you don't necessarily have to have the biggest clan if you want to succeed. You can play Last Oasis how you want to play it. You can still enjoy skirmishes and battles and not lose everything you've worked hard for. Maybe that means the rewards aren't as great, and maybe that's why so many people love Ark and the PvP meta from that. But for me, PvP is about that combat with other players, not about sleeping people. Last Oasis just absolutely nails it. It may not look like a huge one, but when you delve into it, it really does show how many players got excited about Last Oasis. So Last Oasis is the green line, and you can see that when it was at its peak, well, it doesn't look like much has changed. Ark has still got some massive peaks after its latest DLC. However, the moment the servers were at their peak on Last Oasis, you can see a much sharper drop off in the Ark player base. And in fact, that whole weekend, it wasn't as high as the next weekend. This says to me that players were jumping from Ark over to Last Oasis to give it a try. Nothing that abnormal, and doesn't mean that Ark is suddenly going to die, but it does show that these games share a big populace of players. I've been using that word populace like no end. And the same can go for some of the other games too. Conan Exiles had the similar thing. Over that weekend it had its usual sort of numbers, but it was the next weekend they had more, when Last Oasis was pretty much free falling. And just at the bottom there, worth barely a mention, is Atlas, the same sort of stuff. I think there's definitely a lot of people that are looking forward to having a game where it doesn't require all of their life, their blood. They can play a bit of PvP, they can have some combat and some action. They can know it's skill based rather than just who's got the most time. It isn't as janky as some of the other stuff we've seen. To that, the trading possibilities that you've seen in games like Eve and a little bit like Atlas, and I'm really confident that Donkey Crew have got a hit on their hands. Hopefully they can just maintain the content, because it is going to be needed to be kept up over the next few months. Players are pretty fickle, they will go back and forth between their favourite games, and so they really need to make sure they've got strong updates every single month, adding to these mechanics, adding more items, more abilities, more creatures and more endgame and meta. But that'll all come, and I'm pretty confident they're going to do it once they get rid of some of these initial problems. Does it mean it's going to kill the rest of these games? No. Ark, Conan, it's always going to have its player bases. But Donkey Crew have recognised the problems and issues, and I really hope that some of these other big games take note that in the future, whatever they work on, they actually look at some of the biggest issues in PvP and they try and fix it, just like Donkey Crew did too. Agree, disagree, tell me why the PvP in Ark or Conan or whatever is your favourite and why it works so much better. Let me know in the comment section down below. We're still recruiting and we're still looking for alliances, so if you want to join us, make sure you come join my Discord and say hello in the Last Oasis chat. Until next time, Ratbags, I'll see you later.